Should the sky be this colour? I really don't think it should, especially not at like 5 PM. Hey all you Hillmaniacs, it's Hillmanator, and this is my, fifth attempt to record this, because every time I've tried so far, it's just been awful. But hey, this is an attempt at me telling you the first 10 years of my life. I have no idea why you'd be interested in that, but I am, so let's go. Just so you know, there's probably going to be some upsetting stuff in here. My life hasn't been as ideal as a lot of other people's. Not that it's been the worst life ever, but yeah, just thought I'd forewarn you. With that said, let's get into the first decade of my life. For those of you who aren't aware, my family consists of my dad, my mum, my eldest sister, Katie, my older brother, Stephen, my other older sister, Becky, and then there's me, as the youngest of the family. I was born in St Thomas's shortly after the turn of the millennia, which technically makes me a Cockney. However, I don't count myself as a Cockney properly because A, I don't have the accent, B, I only understand the very basics of the rhyming slang, and C, we moved out of London within a week of me being born, so I'm not a real Cockney. However, I don't really fit into any of the other categories. I moved to Essex immediately afterwards, and I am most definitely not an Essex boy. We moved into this small town called Braintree, and we lived in this one house for a while. I have no memory of it because I was a baby. Strange. However, I do know that we lived awfully near a place called the Tweenie Park, except it wasn't called that. That was just what our family called it because the park was multicoloured. Like the kids showed the tweenies, I guess. By the time I was 3, which is when my memories really start, we had moved into another house on the other side of town. This is the house that I spent the most time in from age 0 to 10. As a guy growing up in a household with 2 older sisters, I of course indulged in playing a little bit of dress up, and according to my sisters, I have no memory of this, but according to them, up until about age 6, I used to sometimes do it to myself and then come out saying that I was Susie. Okay. In my first proper memory, the first thing that I'm absolutely definite is a memory and isn't something that I projected, I was going to a kind of pre-nursery thing. It was like a year before we went into nursery, and I was saying goodbye to my mum, and I gave her a goodbye kiss, as you do at that age, and I got a massive electric shock, which I guess kick-started my mind at just remembering things, because pain is a thing. It was here that I met some of my earliest mates, and it's at this point in the story where I'm going to clarify I'm not going to be using people's real names, because privacy and whatnot. So let's say that the guy who I met and made the strongest bond with was of course called Rice. Not for any particular reason, it's just because I've literally got a bag of rice right there. Rice and I were very good friends, and we both ended up going into the same primary school as well, which was great. So me and him basically became best friends, or at least I thought of him as my best friend. He did not think of me as his best friend, but we were still good friends. So I was in this kind of early nursery thing when I was like 3 and 4, and then when I was 4 and it was September time, we went into the actual first year of schooling called reception. Which was when I lost one of my friends. Unfortunately, he moved away to another town, Ipswich, and everyone was very upset, and we actually stayed in contact with him for years afterwards, in classes at least. It was also around this age, maybe a little into year 1 when I was 5. Me and my sister Bex, we created a game which would essentially define this decade, and it also spills over into even now, because the one of the story ideas that I'm working on is loosely based off of this game. Basically, it was a kind of roleplay, but with powers, except not in the conventional way that you're thinking of. It's way too complicated to explain it in this video. When I was 5, I watched the first ever episode of Doctor Who that I had seen, which was The End of the World. I missed the premiere, unfortunately, of Series 1, but I caught episode 2 and I watched the rest of it, and then eventually got back round to watching the premiere. It was great, and it really got me addicted to the show, on any TV show, for the first time, really. And it's probably because of Doctor Who that I'm such a nerd now. If I hadn't have got flipping obsessed with this one thing, then I wouldn't have got obsessed with as many other things as well that linked into it, and then because of that I got obsessed with random bits of mythology, and then through that getting obsessed with other shows and other book series, and just basically everything all stems back to that first time that I watched Doctor Who. At the same age, we moved into year 1, I had a lot of fun. We did create a band in school once called On the Wall, which I don't know why we were called On the Wall. I distinctly remember us having an argument whether we should be on the wall or off the wall. But yeah, there was about 5 of us in this band, and it was terrible because we were all children and none of us played an instrument. But we were a band. By this point, my mind is exceptionally weird. Now, you might be saying, huh, Josh, you're always exceptionally weird, but I can prove that by this point my mind is odd, because we had to retell a folktale or fairy tale story or something like that in just any way we liked, and it would get laminated and put over in Storybook Corner, and it would stay there forever. And so I rewrote the 3 Billy Goats Gruff, except instead of goats they were worms. But that's not all. I had also recently either seen the trailer or the actual film of Wallace and Gromit Meet the Were-Rabbit, and because that concept was so stuck in my childhood brain, I decided to make the troll into a were-rabbit, because why the heck not? Now you might be thinking, there's nothing concerning about this. What do you mean? Why were you weird? Well, here's the thing, the were-rabbit straight up eats the worms, and then I distinctly remember me writing about how they ate their way out of his stomach and then just went on their way, and the rabbit was dead because the worms had eaten their way out of its stomach. I was 5. How did I manage to write this? I just imagined what would happen if they actually had have kept all of those books in Storybook Corner forever, and then some kid in like 2019 just picks it up, opens it up, and it's just like, what the? No! Moving into year 2, and another bit of evidence that I was already messed up in the brain, we had a section in our history lessons called Ghastly and Gory, or something like that. Gory and Grisly, that was it. And we had been learning about the bubonic plague. And for some reason, the most fun that I had at this age during break and lunches was when I was playing this amazing game that I had created, where I was a grave digger during the Great Plague. And we would toss bodies into the graves, and we'd dig graves, and we'd collect the bodies as well. What the heck? It's also when I was 6 when I first became aware of the concepts of suicide and depression in some aspect. I never obviously fully understood it, but I was aware that there was things inside people's heads that could just make them sad all the time, and sometimes that would just make them kill themselves. Because that's something you need to be aware of when you're 6. It's not just that I was aware of the concept of suicide and depression. I had several people in my life who had threatened to or attempted to take their own life, which was concerning. I remember someone very close to our family once just texted me the words, "I'm sorry," and I knew roughly where they were when they texted me that. So me and all of my siblings went down to the river because we were concerned about what they had done. Luckily they hadn't done anything. They were just apologising for an argument that we had had before, but it's concerning how aware I was of suicide at that age. Now, unfortunately, my mind was not as developed then as it is now, which meant that I developed an insanely unhealthy mental attitude towards it, and I figured, basically, this is how my thought process went. If I just do what people tell me, even if I put up a little resistance and then just do what they tell me, they can't be upset at me. And if they're not upset at me, then they won't commit suicide. What the heck, 6-year-old Josh? That's not how that works. Moving into year 3 now, I am 7, I believe, and at this point that a new kid comes into the class who is called Biscuits. And Biscuits is assigned me as his buddy, but none of the other kids seemed to like him that much. I was relatively popular with the other kids, so I made it my mission to make Biscuits a more popular guy. And eventually I did succeed, actually, which was kind of funny. But initially, it was a difficult process. One of the things that I distinctly remember about Biscuits was that there was a lesson where he just decided to whip it out. Because that's what you do when you're 7, I guess. Also, this was around the time where I started setting up my own Doctor Who club inside of the school. It was never sanctioned by the school. And I say my own because Becky, my older sister, she was still in year 6 at this point, and she had a Doctor Who club filled with her friends, but obviously she's in year 6, she doesn't want to hang out with some pathetic year 3s, so I set up my own. And that actually continued for some time, but there was a whole bunch of drama around it in year 4, let me tell you. So there was a guy called Bagel, and Bagel, he was a nice enough guy, but he wanted to be the centre of attention pretty much all the time. And so basically he joined the Doctor Who club initially, then he set up his own club rivaling mine, then he disbanded his club in order to make the SpongeBob club, because obviously who would pick Doctor Who over SpongeBob? Me. But then he disbanded that, rejoined the Doctor Who club, then created another Doctor Who club again, and it was a whole thing. It's also at this age where I nearly moved to China. Basically, my dad felt like he had a calling to go out to China. He'd set up a charity. We were looking into moving into China, and I got to skip roughly a month of school because we went to Hong Kong, then up to Kunming, then into Lijiang, and then back the same route. Just looking at potential places to live, schooling and whatnot, and each one of those places had great stories. In Hong Kong, I managed to find the only English copy of The Koala Brothers, which was a show that I really liked when I was 6, and I was nostalgic for it at age 8. In Kunming, there was the best milkshake shop ever. I still stand by that. I have not had a better milkshake than I did that one time in Kunming. Also, there was a lovely Cantonese guy there who we talked about Doctor Who, because he had watched Doctor Who apparently, and that is also where I got some puppets, which would become important later in the story when I joined our church's puppet group, where basically we would have Christian versions of your conventional songs. I can't remember any off the top of my head, but basically we'd have a bunch of puppets perform Christian versions of regular songs. It was weird. Yeah, it was weird. Then in Lijiang, I accidentally hit a woman in the face because we had gone out to ride the horsey and see the Maharishi bird, as the guy said, just as a bit of a break from all of the places that we'd been, because we'd been looking at schools and housing and all of this lot. And so we'd gone up on the horses, up this mountain, down the other side, and then we got in a boat and we were going to row over to the area that we started in, essentially. But there weren't enough oars, so the guy who usually held the punting stick decided to give it to me, an 8-year-old child who didn't know what punting was. Naturally, I start using it as an oar, which inevitably leads to me thwacking a woman with it behind me. Just... yeah, I didn't get to use the punting stick again. Understandable. Another thing that occurred that year was I became part of my church's drama group, not through conventional means though, because pretty much everyone who was in it at the start was way older than me. They were all at least like 15, going up into their like 50s probably, and I was like a child. So the reason I got added was because one day in school we did like a miniature play thing, and we had basically free control on it, and during rehearsals I had crafted what I felt was a really powerful story. You know, it was truly tragic in its ending because it had something to do with a dragon and a phoenix, and I'm pretty sure the dragon died or something. I honestly can't remember now, but it was a very sad thing. And then during the production, midway through our performance, the guy who was our narrator just decides, I'm just going to change the tone now. It's going to be a comedy. Doesn't tell us all during rehearsals or anything that he's planning anything like this. He just changes the tone, ends the piece by running into a brick wall for some reason. And basically, I complained so much about it to the person who I walked home with every day that she, because she ran this drama group, was just like, you seem passionate about this. Maybe. The reason why I went home with her every day was because she literally lived around the corner from me, whereas both of my parents were working. And basically, before school and after school every day, I would go round to hers and I'd hang out with her son, who was in the year below me. He is called Weetabix, mostly because in another piece that we performed, I had to play a character called Oswald T. Bix, but my friends would call me Otie Bix, if I had any. Gosh, this lighting is flaming awful, isn't it? One sec, let me see if I can... I mean, we're mostly through it now anyway, it's a bit late, but... So, yeah, I joined the church drama group, the church puppet group, I'd been to China, then my dad got ill with a whole bunch of stuff. To be honest, I still don't know everything that he's ill with because it's such a long list, and so we didn't end up moving to China, which, you know, I guess that meant that I didn't have to spend all that time learning Mandarin. 对不起，请问你会说普通话吗? I may be a little bit rusty. Moving into year 5, and I was 9 at this age, so we're getting right up to the end, and it's also at... What the heck happened to my voice there? It's also at this age where someone attempted to kidnap me, I guess. This particular story is weird. So, the original plan was for me to go round to Weetabix's house after school, but he was ill. And I had realised over the course of the day that I had left my watch at the swimming pool when we had our swimming lesson earlier that day. Being the massive intellectual genius that I was at the ripe old age of 9, I figured, I know, I'll just walk to the swimming pool and get my watch, and then I'll walk home, because by the time I get home, no one will have noticed, because both my parents would still be at work, and it'd be like, oh, he's been over at Weetabix's house. Obviously, I did have a phone with me. I believe it was a Nokia 1101, which was my second phone. My first one being a Nokia 3310, I think? Maybe? Either way, they were flipping great. They lasted forever in terms of battery life, in terms of actually survival. They were pretty darn great. I liked those phones. Plus they had Snake and Space Invaders. But anyway, I was walking over to the swimming pool and I was walking the same way as Biscuits. And when we got to his house, Biscuits' mum was like, hey, do you think maybe you should call your mum to tell her what you're doing? So I did, and she reminded me that it was a Thursday. And on Thursdays, I had this thing called mini-cell, where basically all the kids from church would come together and we'd either do like worship tunes, yeah, Jesus, woohoo, or we would just hang out and, you know, we'd get some toast, we'd play some pool, we'd go on the Wii, you know, stuff like that. It was pretty chill. Now, I always got picked up for mini-cell at Weetabix's house, so I had to head back over to Weetabix's house anyway, even though he was ill. It was a very easy route. It was like all main roads, so fairly safe, and it was like 20 minutes tops if you're an exceptionally slow walker and you're also a child. So yeah, as an adult, doing it now, I probably could have done it in 5, to be honest. But I was walking back towards the local Chinese takeaway, which was the corner, heading back onto the main road so that I could get to Weetabix's house. 2 strangers came up to me and they said, oh, we're Kebab's parents. Now, I did know a kebab. We went to Scouts together, which it was something that I haven't actually told you about yet. I was in Beavers, then Cubs, then Scouts. I flipping loved it. I did as many of the trips as I could. I remember going to HMS Belfast, which was great. I remember going on several kind of like camping things, and I eventually became a 6er for my troop. But yeah, I went to the same scout troop as Kebab, so I knew what his parents looked like. And they did not look like you. Who are you, strange people? And why are you inviting me to dinner? Luckily, obviously, I was on a main road, so all I had to do, essentially, was keep walking and just be like, nope, no thank you, nope, I'm going, bye. And there was virtually nothing they could do to me because the area was crowded. Well, relatively crowded. There were like 6 people on the street, but still. And then the way I got them to leave me alone was I just said, oh yeah, I'll come back tomorrow and we can do it then. Which was pretty smart for me as a kid, because easy way to incriminate themselves, isn't there? Luckily, after mini-cell, I told my dad, we called the police, it all got sorted out. It just surprises me, because I was very much the smartest in our classes. This isn't me boasting now, this is literally a fact. I was in top sets for everything and I got the best grades out of everyone in our classes. But I didn't have the common sense to remember that I had mini-cell that day, or to realise, hey, do you think maybe going to the swimming pool isn't a good idea? It's also at this age where I get told that we will be moving to Wales, which surprisingly upset me more than moving to China. I was okay with, you know, going to another continent and having to learn a whole new language and stuff. That was exciting. But going to Wales, no. I was very upset about this as a child. I remember on one particular week when all of my older siblings were away at New Day, which for those of you who aren't aware is a youth festival specifically for like Christian youth and church youth and stuff like that. And basically me, my mum and my dad travelled up to Wales and we were looking around for houses. We found one that we liked and that was where we ended up moving into actually. So in 2010 we all moved to Wales. Now when I first moved to Wales, none of our stuff had arrived, so basically me, my dad and Becky stayed in one room and we just laid on the floor that night whilst Mum, Katie and Stephen all went back to Essex to ensure that our stuff got here, which was uncomfortable. On the plus side, I no longer lived near an area of Braintree which is still referred to as Pedo Woods, because apparently at some point there was a paedophile living in there, which is good to know considering how much time me and my family spent in those woods. I started school a little bit late in Wales, only by like 10 days, but it was weird enough that I was immediately standing out. As well as that, they did this whole thing with the class where basically everyone was sat down and then I had to walk in and introduce myself, and I had my shirt tucked in. I sounded apparently like a posh duck, which I'm still not sure what a posh duck sounds like. Quack, quack. But apparently I sounded like one, and yeah, I didn't make the best first impression. Plus, I'm English, everyone else is Welsh, so, you know, those bloomin' Englishmen. And then there was the fact that I was assigned 2 buddies on my first day. One who was the most popular guy in the class, and the other who was the guy who I decided to hang out with. He was not well liked. And to be honest, I can understand why he was not well liked. Due to all of this, I had started undergoing bullying, social ostracizing, and basically I started feeling pretty sad for myself because nobody in my new school liked me, and I had been very popular at my last school. I had managed to get biscuits from being this very unpopular guy to the point where he was one of the most popular in our year group. I was still calling my friends back home, but gradually a lot of them stopped calling, and eventually Rice even stopped being in contact with me, which flipping hurt because literally we stayed in contact with the guy who left for Ipswich for years, and within 6 months of me moving to Wales, no one could be bothered to get in contact with me. I haven't spoken to a lot of them since then, which is a shame because they were such a big part of my childhood, and I always thought back on it as if, oh, they were clearly, like, I was so close with these guys, they were my friends, and then I lost them all, and that's why I have all of these things. But evidently I wasn't as important to them as I thought I was, which is a weird thought to have. On the plus side, as one final thing that occurred in the first 10 years of my life, I managed to make a couple of friends at this new school. You've seen one of them on the channel, Ben. He was in the Ant-Man video, I believe. And basically, I made friends with him first because they allowed us to bring Beyblades into school, and he had a whole bunch of Beyblades, and he let me borrow one time, and I won the battle. So, yeah. Then we stayed friends. I continuously beat him at Beyblades, and because of that, I eventually got more and more integrated with his friendship group, and I'm still friends with all of them now, pretty much. Or rather, all of the ones who went to the secondary school that I did, but that's for another day. So I know that I've missed out massive chunks and hugely important details, but to be honest, a lot of them I'm simply not comfortable talking about, so you're not going to get to hear them. Deal with it. But I do hope that you enjoyed whatever the heck this was. I've literally just spent how long talking about myself? And not even myself now, talking about myself from over a decade ago. Yeah, okay, thanks for watching all. I shall catch you next time.